You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Tuesday, June 16th, 2015, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. I'm so glad you could join us today because we have got so much to talk about in the next few segments of the show. In particular, we're continuing to look at how the state of Oregon has been divided into two states now. We're now New Oregon and West Idaho. And West Idaho comprises the counties east of the Cascade Mountains that voted more than 55% against our marijuana legalization initiative. They've been given now in House Bill 3400 the special privilege of not having to follow that statewide law when it comes to local bans on marijuana facilities. The man behind that is Senator Ted Ferrioli. He's a Republican from West Idaho, and he fought tooth and nail for that provision. Well, a listener of mine sent him an email asking why he did that, and the listener forwarded to me the response from Senator Ferrioli. So guess what our radical rant is today? Yeah, we're going to be tearing apart Senator Ferrioli's justification for splitting Oregon into two states based on whether or not they like pot. So stay tuned for that. That's coming up at the radical rant at the end of the show. Also on the show today, we got a special couple of guests joining us. Wendy Robbins and Karen Paul. They are the co-creators and producers of The Marijuana Show. The reality show will be filming its second season, and they're auditioning folks to be on this reality show. So we'll talk to them at 1:30, and maybe you can find out how you could be a reality star. Also coming up on the show today, we've got some drug war data mining. A new study is out showing that passing medical marijuana laws does not increase the teen use of marijuana in the states that pass those laws. We've also got in Behind the Headlines an interesting story from the Marshall Project about how even despite decriminalization laws and legalization laws, immigrants to this country can still face deportation over the slightest possession of marijuana. We'll take a deep look into that in Behind the Headlines. Of course, we start everything off with the 420 radio news, all sorts of great headlines to get to you today. And quick note about hour 2, I'm going to have to cut it off early today. Once again, I've got one of those appointments I got to make it to. The appointment is shortly after 5, so if I don't leave early, I will be late. So we will play for you a couple of interviews and highlights from our archives in the last half hour of the show. We're also expecting a visit in hour 2 from Pork Chop and a couple of the marijuana dispensary owners here in Portland, giving us an update on the plan to give away pounds and pounds of marijuana absolutely free on July 1st when marijuana becomes legal in this state. Well, at least in the western side of the state. All that's coming up on the Russ Belville Show. Remember, we are live on 420radio.org every weekday, Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Pacific time. We also now have our Ustream cameras up. Hi there, viewers. If you'd like to take a look at what it looks like for me to talk into a microphone for 2 hours a day, you're welcome to join us on ustream.tv/channel/Radical Russ. 420 Radio News is next. I'll see you guys in the chat room. Welcome to the show.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio, your ticket to the High Times Cannabis Cups.
420 Radio is brought to you by Sacred Serum, who is focused on creating elegant and sophisticated cannabis solutions through its line of dispensers and vaporizers that come preloaded with the world's finest cannabis concentrate. Sacred Serum's concentrate is made on pharmaceutical-grade supercritical CO2 extraction machines that use absolutely no butane or other toxic chemicals. The Vesica, the company's innovative new way to dab and frost, is now available in dispensaries across California. Sacred Serum, elegance and sophistication concentrated.
Hey, I'm Herb Thrasher, host of the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour, live every Friday night at 8 Pacific. Tune in for 2 hours of metal marijuana mayhem featuring exclusive interviews with the latest bands, highlights of live shows, and the latest in marijuana news. It's the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour, Friday nights at 8 p.m. at 420 Radio, or catch the replay on Saturday nights.
420 Radio is brought to you by Sacred Serum, who is focused on creating.
It's time for the 420 Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Transcripts of 420 Radio News are available daily on our website at 420radio.org. Now, here's Russ Belville with your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. This is your 420 Radio News for Tuesday, June 16th, 2015. Patients who are eligible for medical marijuana can now legally receive it in Georgia. Tuesday, the Georgia Department of Public Health will unveil its low THC oil registry, a secure database of people authorized to have cannabidiol oil. The low THC oil registry permits individuals to legally have up to 20 fluid ounces of the cannabidiol oil. To join the database, a patient must consult with his or her physician about the possibility of obtaining a membership card. The cards are $25 each and are valid for 2 years from the date issued. Patients seeking verification must have lived in Georgia for at least 1 calendar year or be less than 1 year old and be suffering from one of 8 conditions: cancer, seizure disorder, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, sickle cell disease, Crohn's disease, or mitochondrial disease. The race is on as Ohio lawmakers rush to throw down a constitutional obstacle in the path of supporters of a marijuana legalization campaign. House Joint Resolution 4 had a first hearing today, just hours after it was introduced by State Representatives Ryan Smith and Mike Curtins. The resolution would make it harder, but not impossible, for a monopoly or special economic interest to submit a proposed amendment to modify the Ohio Constitution. Monopoly interests could still propose amendments, but they would first have to seek voter approval at one election to bypass the economic interest ban, then pursue a second vote later on the issue itself. Responsible Ohio spokesman Ian James said in a statement that state lawmakers, quote, trusted the voters enough to elect them, but when faced with an issue they disagree with, lawmakers want to deny voters the right to decide. No other state has passed a constitutional amendment to limit voters' rights, end quote. A bill that would expedite access to medical marijuana for severely ill patients in New York will head to Governor Andrew Cuomo's desk. The Republican-controlled Senate passed legislation Monday night that would create a special certification for patients with a progressive and degenerative disease or whose life or health is at risk without the drug. Those patients would be allowed to access medical marijuana before the state's program officially launches in January. The bill would allow the State Department of Health to suspend certain requirements, allowing it to immediately award a license to grow and distribute the drug, which critics have said may open the state up to a lawsuit. Parents of children with rare forms of epilepsy had urged lawmakers to support the legislation, traveling repeatedly to the state capitol to push for its passage. The Senate passed the bill by a 50-12 vote after the Democrat-controlled Assembly passed it last week. The mayor of Santa Ana, California, is named in a lawsuit which alleges the city was clawing in money from bribes in return for guaranteeing a license to distribute marijuana. It comes nearly 3 weeks after the raid of pot shop Sky High Holistic was caught on surveillance video that appeared to show questionable behavior by 10 officers. Santa Ana Mayor Miguel Pulido was named in the suit along with city employee Yvette Aguilar and the city itself. It alleges the city solicited $25,000 payments and gifts from marijuana dispensaries, which would guarantee business would be granted a license in the lottery system. It also claims police were used to shut down operations that did not pay up. Quote, it's deplorable that city officials and people seeking financial gain would use the police to accomplish their self-serving goals, end quote, said attorney Matthew Pappas, who is representing the raided shop. By a margin of 20%, a majority of Michigan voters support legalization of small amounts of marijuana for adult recreational use, as two competing groups race to put the issue on the November 2016 ballot. Support for legalization topped 56% in a statewide poll conducted June 9th through 11th by the Glengarriff Group, Incorporated, and released exclusively to the Detroit News and WDIV-TV. Among 600 likely 2016 general election voters, opposition to ending Michigan's decades-old cannabis prohibition was just under 36%. Among voters age 30, 74% support legalizing marijuana, according to the poll, but their grandparents and parents may not approve. More than 51% of voters over age 65 oppose marijuana legalization. While nearly 65% of men favor legalization, support among women narrows to 48% in favor. This has been your 420 Radio News for Tuesday, June 16th, 2015. I'm Russ Belville. 420 Radio, turning red states and blue states green. Oregon has joined Washington and Colorado in legalizing marijuana. We're Portland NORML, the national organization for the reform of marijuana laws chapter in Portland, Oregon. Join us as we celebrate the launch of an exciting new era in marijuana freedom in Oregon. Our job has just begun. Powerful interests want to white out the most important portions of Oregon's legalization law. By joining Portland NORML, you add your voice to the thousands who voted for Measure 91 and want it to be implemented as written. The people have spoken. Now it is time for the legislature to obey the will of the people. Find out more about Portland NORML at portlandnormal.org. Attend our monthly membership meetings on the fourth Saturday of the month. See our website for more details. Portland NORML, ensuring responsible adult marijuana consumers are afforded the same rights, privileges, and responsibilities as beer drinkers.
NORML stands for Responsible Adult Cannabis Use. If cannabis use is causing problems in your life, consider taking a break or seeking medical assistance. Consider ceasing cannabis use if you have a family history of mental illness. Don't drive or operate heavy machinery while impaired by cannabis use. Cannabis use is not without risks, even though the risks may be far less than those posed by legal drugs.
The Fingerboard Extension has fretted instruments to enhance your creativity. It has new and used guitars and banjos from beginning to high class. The Fingerboard Extension has National Resophonic, Husson Dalton, Larrabee, Heritage and Recording King guitars, and Mike Ramsey, Wildwood, Gold Tone, and Recording King banjos. The Fingerboard Extension also has drum stuff, used gear, and parts. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension, downtown Corvallis, Oregon at 120 Northwest 2nd, or check out the inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com and reverb.com. The law offices of Omar Figueroa would like to remind you to stand up for your rights. If you are detained or arrested, treat law enforcement with respect and stand up for your rights by repeating, "I respectfully invoke all of my legal and constitutional rights. I do not consent to any search and seizure. I want to remain silent, and I want to speak with my attorney." Please contact the law offices of Omar Figueroa at 415-489-0420 or 707-829-0215 or on the web at omarfigueroa.com. Welcome back. Time for us to go behind the headlines, and we're looking at a headline at the Marshall Project. They're at themarshallproject.org. The headline reads, "Get Caught with Pot, Face Deportation. As states loosen marijuana laws, the consequences for non-citizens remain as strict as ever." Of course, we've had 4 states now that have legalized marijuana, but even before that, we have, now 19 states with Louisiana coming on board, assuming Governor Jindal signs that pretty soon. We'll have 19 states that have marijuana decriminalization, which is usually defined as possession of, well, in case of Louisiana, it's 14 grams or less, but in most states, it's an ounce or less of marijuana, and the possession is treated either as a civil citation or a minor misdemeanor. It depends state by state, but it just generally means that the cops don't arrest you. You get a ticket, you get your marijuana confiscated, and you get a fine, and you don't get any criminal record. So this is great if you're an American citizen. But if you're a non-resident, if you're here on a green card, if you're on a student visa, the rules are completely different for you. even if you're living in Oregon, Alaska, Washington, or Colorado, where marijuana is legal. The story begins discussing the case of George Kiden. He was a student at University of Toledo and got busted on a $30 undercover buy. He was convicted in 1987 and got 2 years probation and paid $1,000 in fines. And he said, I didn't think much of it. I figured since I paid my fine and did my probation, I'm good. This is 1987. So he does his 2 years of probation. It's now 1989. But the problem for George is he's not a U.S. citizen. He came to America in 1981 on a student visa from Kuwait. So in 1999, 10 years after he'd finished his probation, he was arrested by immigration officers traveling from his home in Western New York. Then he was locked in detentions for months. He was not allowed to travel and completely in legal limbo. That's in 1999 when that began. Now, 7 years later, in 2006, the governor of Ohio granted Kiden a full pardon. A full pardon. His crime doesn't even exist anymore in the timeline anymore. And yet he is still facing difficulties with his immigration status because of this. Now, while the states have loosened their laws on marijuana, the penalties under federal law haven't changed, and federal law on how drug convictions affect immigration status hasn't changed. So the punishment for pot can be devastating for non-citizens that are caught with it, and mostly because when they're caught with it, they think, it's decrim, it's just a ticket, it's no big deal, so they don't get a lawyer. And they don't bother to fight it, and oftentimes they just plead guilty, and years later that guilty plea can come back and get them deported. A report released today by Human Rights Watch found that between 2007 and 2012, there were 34,000 people whose most serious conviction was marijuana possession. 34,000 people deported just because they possessed marijuana, and another 18,000 deported for a conviction of selling marijuana. And again, we're not talking about getting rid of drug cartel traffickers or anything. We're talking about permanent residents or undocumented immigrants, people who have been in this country paying sales taxes and payroll taxes and working hard for a couple of decades, getting kicked out of this country for a pot conviction, for something that was a civil infraction in many of the states that they were in. In the case of George Kiden, University of Toledo, that's Ohio, folks, where the possession of up to 100 grams of marijuana is decriminalized. It's just a ticket. But George had to face all of this detention, basically being, kept in a cage for something that is not supposed to put you in a cage. Now, the Immigrations and Custom Enforcement does have a policy. They say those convicted of marijuana possession would not be an enforcement priority. Yeah, it's not our highest priority. Just like cops always say, legalizing marijuana won't change anything because marijuana is not our highest priority. And yet it still seems to get people deported, get people busted, get people put into cages. Now, in 2010, there was a Supreme Court case that addressed this. It was called Padilla versus Kentucky, and it declared that immigrants could claim ineffective counsel if their defense lawyers didn't tell them that a pot ticket could have much greater consequences with respect to immigration. That's like a judicial or a legal malpractice, right? You can get a new trial, you can declare a mistrial, whatever it might be, because your defense attorney didn't realize that a ticket for someone with a green card can turn into a deportation. But in 2013, the Supreme Court ruled that decision doesn't apply to convictions before 2010. So it doesn't help. Doesn't help this guy. Doesn't help this Kiden guy. He's without a paddle because he was busted in 1987. So many of these defendants don't pick up a lawyer. They waive their right to a lawyer because, hey, it's just a ticket. It's just a traffic ticket. What's the big deal? And next thing you know, they're getting deported. Like Violetta Chapin. She's a law professor at University of Colorado. She represented a 19-year-old who entered the U.S. from Mexico as a child. Okay, so as a kid, he came across the border. When he's 19, the cops find marijuana in his pocket, and they placed him into deportation proceedings. And he had been eligible for a program that President Obama announced that would protect the Dreamers. Remember that thing?
Come and see the violence inherent in the system. Help! Help! I'm being repressed.
But that kid got deported anyway because he wasn't enrolled in school at the time, which he was supposed to do according to the terms of the Obama program. But because he was detained on immigration charges, he couldn't go to school. There's so many more of these cases in the Marshall Project. I encourage you to check it out at themarshallproject.org. We got to take a break. It's 20 after in Denver, and you know what that means. 420 Radio. Tune in, turn on, get highly educated. Get.buzz. .buzz is the internet platform that fuels community interest, excitement, and new experiences. .buzz is the premier online destination for internet users seeking the latest news on a variety of topics. .buzz appeals to groups active in blogging, communications, journalism, advertising, and marketing. .buzz offers registrants a stronger alternative to the shrinking namespace of existing top-level domain names, such as .com, .net, and .org. Get your name now at get.buzz.
Funky Roller Ring.
This is Big Daddy, and I want you to join me every Thursday night for some good old soul, funk, and disco at the Funky Roller Ring on 420 Radio. You dig?
This is Radical Russ encouraging you to take a look at the Weed Blog every day. Johnny Green and the staff at the Weed Blog are on top of all the latest developments in the fight to end marijuana prohibition nationwide. You can even get the Weed Blog on your smartphone by installing the Weed Blog app for iPhone and Android. If it's about weed, it's on the Weed Blog, including my original writing. So don't delay, read the Weed Blog today. Arguing for the end of adult marijuana prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It is even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more in this edition of Drug War Data Mining. Welcome back, everybody. Today for the Drug War Data Mines, we are going to take a look at an article that's out in The Lancet, which is a major medical journal. A new study that is out from the... who's this from? Let's see. I don't see who it's from. But anyway, new study is out showing that medical marijuana laws that have been introduced in the United States since 1996 have not led to an increase in adolescent marijuana use. That's right. Passing medical marijuana in your state, according to these researchers, does not lead to more teenagers in your state using marijuana. Now, they've used 24 years of data, so they go all the way up to 2014 on this to try to figure out, is there a relationship, a causal relationship between state medical marijuana laws and adolescent use of marijuana? They use the Monitoring the Future study of 8th, 10th, and 12th grade students in 400 schools. This is part of the Monitoring the Future figure, and the data include 1,098,270 adolescents that were surveyed over a 24-year period. Now, they did find that, in fact, marijuana use is more prevalent in the states that have set up medical marijuana laws. It was 15.87% versus 13.27% between the states with medical versus without medical marijuana. However, the risk of marijuana use in states before passing medical marijuana laws did not differ significantly from the risk after the medical marijuana laws were passed. That is to say, yeah, states like Oregon and California and Washington that pass medical marijuana have more teenage marijuana use, but those states always had more teenage marijuana use. It's not that passing medical marijuana laws leads to more teenagers smoking pot. It's that places that have more people smoking pot, including teenagers, are more likely to pass medical marijuana laws. And according to their interpretation, just reading, quote, our findings, consistent with previous evidence, suggest that passage of state medical marijuana laws does not increase adolescent use of marijuana. However, overall, adolescent use is higher in states that have ever passed such a law than in other states. State-level risk factors other than medical marijuana laws could contribute to both marijuana use and the passage of medical marijuana laws, and such factors warrant investigation. Exactly. It's not that a medical marijuana law leads to a teenager smoking. It's not that a teenager smoking leads to a medical marijuana law. It's that these states have some sort of conditions within them that lead to both of those things. A greater tolerance for marijuana use in general, perhaps. Now, the report is available online. Time Magazine is one of the first to have reported on this one, and they've got some great tables and information on this. What they found is that in states with a medical marijuana law, 8th graders, 7.22% of 8th graders were using marijuana compared to 6.95 in a non-medical state. At 10th grade, it was 18% versus 15 in a non-medical state. And by senior year, 12th grade, 22.36% for the medical marijuana states versus 17.83% for the non-medical marijuana states. So, of course, the marijuana use goes up as the kids get older, but it seems to be not going up much farther than it would go up in a non-medical marijuana state. And to confirm that, there are some great charts in this particular report that show grade 8, grade 10, and grade 12 from the years 1991 to 2014, and a red line that represents the states with medical marijuana, and a blue line representing the states without medical marijuana law. And both the lines for grades 8, 10, and 12 rise and fall. They rise leading up into the 2000s. They fall leading toward the mid-2000s. They rise again as we approach the 2010s. But the interesting point is that both the red and blue lines rise and fall together, and rise and fall at the same basic slope. So yes, there's less overall use with the blue line, the non-medical states, than the red line, the medical states, but they stay relative to each other. There's not a big gap that appears when the medical marijuana states pass their laws. The gap remains the same throughout grades 8, 10, and 12 for a period of 24 years. They have further graphs in here, more graphs in here that show state by state the error bars and how close they are to the U.S. average. And again, we see in the states with or without medical marijuana, not much difference in the data. So it's time for the drug warriors to retire that old scary talking point that medical marijuana, and what about the children?
420 Radio, the world's voice of marijuana legalization.
Growing plants indoors can be a rewarding hobby, but electricity bills can go through the roof. Then you have to cool down all those big hot lights. It can drive a grower insane. With Lush LED lighting, you can solve many of these issues and double your rewards. Matt and his scientists have developed the perfect light for flowering plants with far less cost and heat. And the results? Very effective. Check out LushLEDlighting.com right now and tell them Radical Russ sent you.
NORMAL stands for Responsible Adult Cannabis Use. If cannabis use is causing problems in your life, consider taking a break or seeking medical assistance. Consider ceasing cannabis use if you have a family history of mental illness. Don't drive or operate heavy machinery while impaired by cannabis use. Cannabis use is not without risks, even though the risks are far less than those posed by legal drugs.
Hey everybody, it's Radical Russ here from 420 Radio, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
As marijuana moves into the mainstream, more filmmakers are taking a look at all aspects of cannabis culture. These days, marijuana movies are about more than hiding from Sergeant Stadenko or trying to get to White Castle for the munchies. Join with us as we explore the latest in the cannabis cinema. Welcome back, everybody. Time for us to go to the cannabis cinema, and sometimes it's the small screen cinema as well. We're joined by the co-creators and producers of The Marijuana Show, Wendy Robbins and Karen Paul. Welcome to the show.
I'm going to switch my voices. This is Wendy Robbins, and Karen is not joining us today, but I will vibe into her so that she can join us.
That's awesome. Okay, so Wendy, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. And thank you also for rescheduling. We had some tech difficulties the last time we were scheduled, and it just broke my heart. I was glad we were able to get you back on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Russ. I really appreciate it.
Okay, so The Marijuana Show, let's get all the basics out of the way. What is it and where can people see it?
Okay. So it's think of it like Shark Tank and The Apprentice for ganjapreneurs. Essentially, we had for season 1, we had 200 people come and audition. And this was like we fought it up, and 2 weeks later, 200 people came and auditioned, and 22 got called back and were given challenges. The challenges were either emotional or they were, how to do your business better, that kind of thing. And then we got down to 10, and 10 got to go to Bud Camp. And Bud Camp was 3 days of everything from rules, regulations, compliance, branding, marketing, how do you pitch investors? And then finally they got to pitch investors. And we had over $5 million offered to our contestants for season 1, and season 2 looks like it's just gonna be outrageous. I mean, the amount of potential money is really incredible, plus mentorship.
All right.
And then I know, right? And then how will people see it? Well, that's a good question too. Originally, it was just on our site, which is themarijuanashow.com. We definitely like people to go there. And then we just did a deal, and it'll take a little while for it to happen, at least a couple months. But we'll be on Dish, Comcast, Xbox, Samsung, Roku, and then a number of streaming channels too to just really get that distribution up. So we'll reach over 50 million households. Doesn't mean 50 million are going to watch, but at least we have that kind of reach. So it's pretty cool.
Wow. So how have the contestants in season 1 fared in their business proposals?
Oh, that's a really good question. It was all over the map. It was from not being able to accept, for instance, one person really wanted $1 million and could not see taking less, couldn't see that other offers, like having a commercial kitchen. In this case, that particular person was had an edible. And so we were fast-tracking them through the process, got the money, et cetera. And she just couldn't see it. She needed $1 million is what her feeling was, and we weren't offering $1 million. So what I learned from that is sometimes it doesn't always look the way that you think, and that it's really nice to be flexible. And so that was the lesson that I got out of that. But people all really truly all over the map in terms of really successful deals, national distribution, to struggling still. It's
all
sort of
right.
like life.
So you're looking at season 2 now, and you're holding auditions now for season 2, or when does that happen?
Yeah, we've been having auditions. We had them in Arizona at a wonderful, wonderful place called Hempful. And Hempful is a cafe. They auditioned for season 2, and we just started to become friends. They'll be in season 2, and they held an audition. We'll have an audition in LA and Seattle, and also. So if anyone's up in Seattle, you definitely let us know by just going to the Marijuana Show, and then you'll see literally a little button that'll say audition, and you can sign up, and we'll see you. And then also Hempapalooza, which is happening June 21st in outside. What's the name of the town? Oh my gosh, Brennan.
Yeah.
Does that ring a bell?
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. But that, and so it's outside of Seattle, so we'll be there, and then we'll come back to LA. And then, I'm not kidding, we have people from Romania who have sent in auditions, Europe, Asia, Canada. So it's all over the place. And this time, unlike last time, we're allowing for dispensaries too. So say a listener has a dispensary, but they're not super successful, or they're a great grower, but they're not really good at the retail side. We've put together a team that can turn that around, and will invest money and like that. And it's really because they want to expand outside of Colorado. So that's pretty cool too, because we'll have literally millions of dollars available.
So is this coming out to Seattle and Los Angeles new? Were you just focused on Colorado in the first season?
Yeah, the reason why we chose Denver is because the recreational. So because it's legal, we knew that we wouldn't get in trouble. So if you needed to taste that edible, not an issue, or we weren't sure if people were going to have strains or different things. So that's why we had it there. We can do it in Seattle because it's rec, or we probably will go back to Denver. But people will come from all over the place. So wherever they're listening to the show, that's totally cool. Just know that you need to come to Denver for the pitch.
Okay. We are speaking with Wendy Robbins from The Marijuana Show. They're out at themarijuanashow.com. And we've one of our live listeners on the chat room wanted to find out what Roku channel will that be on? Do you know?
I don't know, but as soon as I do know, I'll let you know.
Yeah, send me a note, send me a tweet. I'll tweet it out. We'll get the word out for you. So how many are you going for? 10 final contestants when you get done with this? Is that the goal?
We did 10 before. I think it's going to be based on merit. So it's going to be based on the value that we think that the person or the business will have, and then also, can we get them the investor? And, there's no guarantee, no 100% guarantee. But unlike season 1, we really, really have taken a lot of time to choose the investors, and then know what they like, and they're connecting ahead of time so that we pretty much know who's going to get money. But at the same time, you never know, because it can be some wild cards, and so we're planning on that too.
All right, I have a passing acquaintance with the Apprentice and Shark Tank and some of these entrepreneurial based shows, and I'm just wondering, in producing the Marijuana Show, it had to have been much more difficult. I mean, considering that these entities can't, for the most part, get bank accounts, they got all sorts of tax problems. I mean, what were some of the difficulties you found in trying to produce this compared to, say, a regular reality show?
Well, first of all, I guess like any reality show that deals with this, we had an SEC attorney, Barry Gainsbourg, who's wonderful. By the way, if anyone needs an attorney, an SEC attorney is great. And it was because there's certain things you can and can't say. And in terms of the business, I think being a entrepreneur is way harder than being an entrepreneur. So even though you may have a love of the plant and understand the medicine of the plant, it doesn't mean that you're going to succeed in this, because the regulations keep changing, so you've got to be flexible. It's incredibly expensive. You can't write off what you normally could write off. The cost of goods sold, you cannot write off. You still have to pay the taxes, even though it's federally illegal. The federal government is more than happy to accept your truckloads of cash. You can't use a bank. It's like doing business with your eyes closed and arms behind your back and going, there you go. And because the laws change, and this is something that we did an experiment. We did like a little bit of a game show, and it was because we know that law can be boring, or we know that accounting can be boring. So what do? Well, you create a game show and you get good prizes. And so what we learned is just phenomenal in terms of just tax codes, and we did something where we kind of stumped people with rules that had just changed like days before we shot. And the truth is if you were running a business and you didn't know those rules, you were still responsible. So what's at stake is literally your freedom, and your family or your children, losing custody, etc., just because you don't know one piece of the law. And believe me, they change. So that was what we were trying to prove with the show is you have to be on top of it where other businesses are more established.
You know, I look around the TV landscape these days, and staid organizations like CNN and MSNBC are producing. It seems like marijuana show every other week. Is there a possibility this goes to the big leagues, that you take this to a major network?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because we did just sign a deal, and it's more for a production company than it is who has the connections with the networks. And I'm also meeting with an entertainment attorney while I'm in Los Angeles, which is where I'm talking to you from now. And the idea is to go network. The reason why, and again, I have 13 years background in writing, directing, producing, and shows won a couple Emmy Awards, etc. So I understand that part of the business, but it takes a long time. Just like I starred with Kelly Ripa on a television series, and it was for the Learning Channel, which is Discovery Channel, right? And it literally took her over a year to sell this concept. It took a year to shoot 8 episodes. Then it took another 6 months for them to get it out, and it was a dud. I mean, it didn't go anywhere. So it's very time consuming. And on the internet, as you heard, 2 weeks, we had an idea, and within a month we were up there and had a little over 500,000 people viewing in pretty fast. And that's pretty cool, because you can also control your message. And what my concern is with network isn't really about necessarily legalizing cannabis or legalizing hemp or explaining what CBD does, although I think CNN's done a really nice job. That's not necessary. Sometimes it's to be foolish or, different things. And we really, really, honestly, from our gut, want to see it become legalized. And so that's it. But yes, we are going for network now, because what we did is we created a carve-out. So we'll still be able to do our show, and we're changing the network show enough so that we can still do our show and then be able to do a network show too.
That's fascinating. I would have never considered that there was that time lag in producing something for a network, and with something changing so rapidly and radically as the marijuana laws in this country, it sounds like you went with the best option. Doing it the internet way, you were able to maintain control and get things produced quickly. We're speaking with Wendy Robbins. She's one of the co-creators and co-producers of the Marijuana Show. They're taking auditions for their second season. We got about a minute left here, Wendy. Can you tell people how they can get their audition in, where they got to go, what they got to do?
Yeah, go to themarijuanashow.com. So it's got a the in front of it because the Marijuana Show is already gone. So themarijuanashow.com. And then on there, it'll say auditions on a tab. You click on that, and it'll tell you the rules. You have to be 21 years old. We're really looking for established businesses. If you have a dispensary or edibles, we're looking for you having your license and your permits. So it's not just like, hey, I've got a great recipe for, a pot brownie. It's not that. It's you understand the business more, so it's more established. And basically, literally, we have millions and millions and millions of dollars potentially available to the right people. So it's definitely worth it if you're listening. And it's not right for you, but you know somebody. If you don't mind sharing the buzz, we really appreciate it, because that's what it takes. Unlike network, we're here just person to person, making sure that we make a difference. So, thank you, Russ, for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. Last thing is I want to really thank Starbuds, who's one of our sponsors, and Hempapalooza, two sponsors. I just wanted to give them a shout-out.
Well, right on. And if you're auditioning in Seattle, who knows? Maybe I'll have to click that audition button. You can do the reality of me talking in a mic 2 hours a day about weed. That'll be good TV, huh?
Yeah, hey, if you're looking for money for expansion or marketing or whatever, I'm sure we could work something out.
I'll take a look. Thanks so much, Wendy Robbins from themarijuanashow.com. Check it out, everyone. Stay tuned. We got the Radical Rant coming up next.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
You can get 420 Radio on the go with our Shoutcast stream for all internet-enabled media players. Go to rad-r.us/420shout or just click the Shoutcast icon below the live radio feed at 420radio.org. Adam Hand of Handmade Apparel produces quality custom designs for t-shirts, hats, and other apparel. Handmade Apparel is the official design shop for 420 Radio, among many clients who rely on Adam Hand for everything from short-run custom projects to full-run clothing lines. Visit handmadeapparel.biz to browse the selection of handmade gear or to get a personal quote for your own designs. Handmade Apparel, a proud supporter of 420radio.org.
What's to keep somebody from getting all potted up on weed and then getting behind the wheel?
The Russ Belville Show reminds you to never smoke and drive impaired. Hang out for a while. Share.
You know Herb Thrasher from the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour. Now get ready for Herb Age Designs for the proud cannabis consumer. Herb Age Designs, lifestyle gear for the 420 friendly. Herb Age Designs, we've got Frisbee golf discs and durable hemp gear. Herb Age Designs, we've got shot glasses, drinking glasses, coffee mugs, and beer cozies. Check us out on Facebook and online at herbagedesigns.com. And follow Herb Age and Herb Thrasher on Twitter.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
And one major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant. All right, welcome back, everybody. We are continuing a rant from yesterday. You know, we told you about how Senator Ted Ferrioli, the Republican from Eastern Oregon, has fought to get a special exemption from the statewide marijuana legalization initiative that we passed. He got it so that if a county voted 55% or more against the initiative, it could ban marijuana businesses with a simple vote of its city council or county commission. Whereas the rest of the counties in the state have to follow the initiative law that we passed that says you have to have a vote of the people, a petition drive and a vote of the people to be able to ban marijuana businesses in a city or county. And remember, folks, we're not talking about just recreational pot shops. We're talking about medical marijuana dispensaries that a city council in Eastern Oregon can just ban with a handful of people on the city council. Well, to follow up on that, one of my listeners decided to write an email to Senator Ted Ferrioli and very politely ask him, what the fuck? Okay. And not in those words, of course, but like, what's up with that? Right. So Senator Ferrioli sent him back a response justifying why the eastern half of the state, which I will now refer to as West Idaho, is able to completely ignore something that 56% of the state voters passed. So I'll give you his responses and then I'll kind of add my stuff in between. Here we go. This is from Senator Ferrioli. Writers of Measure 91 knew that rural areas would be skeptical, but underestimated how much they might oppose or even resist the new law. In fact, the opt-out designed into Measure 91 would have required rural citizens, who voted no by a wide margin in some cases, to face another public election on the question, leading many to ask, what part of my no vote did you not understand? Well, Senator Ferrioli, what part of the yes vote from 56% of the state do you not understand? That first no vote was not a vote on whether, Malheur County wanted legal pot shops. It was a statewide vote as to whether pot shops would be legalized statewide. Malheur County and the rest of West Idaho voted no, and they were outvoted by the rest of the state. That's how this thing called democracy works. See, elections have consequences. Does Eastern Oregon now get to be governed by Dennis Richardson and represented by Monica Webby? Or is marijuana policy the only statewide election for which West Idaho gets its own way? Senator Ferrioli continues, in that case, the only way to reverse that decision, in other words, to unwind that second no vote, would be through a third referral to the people. Oh, gee, this democracy thing sure is difficult, huh? So they voted no on a statewide election they lost, which means that no vote didn't count. They lost that election. You don't get to have the no in your pocket as if you won something. You lost that election. And then through that law, they would have had to have another election which they supposedly vote no on. And now you're saying what a pain in the ass it would be to have a third election to vote yes to repeal it? Whoa, gee, democracy. It's just such a pain in the ass. Let's continue. Oregon voters, if nothing else, are stubborn. If they vote once on an issue, fine. If they're forced to vote twice on a measure, like Death with Dignity Act, they get very cranky, and the issue would be considered a closed question for decades, as with Monmouth, Oregon's last dry city. Oh, Senator Ferrioli, you don't understand that on this show I look shit up. First of all, Oregon's Death with Dignity Act was passed in 1994. It was Measure 16, a statewide measure that was passed by the voters of the state. Eastern Oregon didn't get to decide that it was a crime to commit suicide if you're terminally ill. That law applied to every sick person in the entire fucking state. They didn't get an exemption from it because they voted 55% against it and thought that sick people killing themselves was icky somehow. It applied to the whole state. Now, that law was held up by an injunction until 1997. Okay, that was, there are some judicial issues to settle. So the all-knowing, wise legislature decided that the state's voters didn't know what they were doing. Gee, does that sound familiar? And placed Measure 51 on the 1997 ballot to repeal the Death with Dignity Act. And guess what? It was rejected by 60% of the voters. Gosh, it kind of reminds me of that time when the all-knowing, wise legislature decided in 1998 that Oregon's 1973 marijuana decriminalization was a mistake, referred it to the voters, and were soundly rebuked by the voters 2-1. Y'all don't really understand what the people want regarding marijuana, do you? And as for Monmouth, for people that don't know, it was settled by religious folks in 1852 who established alcohol prohibition there in 1859. Citizens attempted to overturn that prohibition in 1936, then 1950, then 1954, then 1976, and failed to do so every time. Finally, in 2002, the citizens there succeeded in overturning prohibition by a 58% vote. What you'll note in this retelling of history, Senator, is that nowhere along this Monmouth timeline was it the Monmouth City Council making these changes. The citizens were forced to gather petitions and hold a vote. Democracy, remember? Now, based on your context, you seem to be holding Monmouth up as the example. Kind of this idea that, well, if it's just the people that vote to ban marijuana dispensaries, they'll have to have a vote to unban them, and that'll fail, and unban them, and that'll fail, and unban them, and that'll fail. Gee, just won't it be easier for the city council to overturn it? Yeah, right. You're saying the Monmouth City Council would have overturned alcohol prohibition on its own sooner than 2002 if it could have? Really? Have you been to Monmouth? He continues. I wanted an opt-out by simple majority vote of the city council or county commission so that combat veterans suffering PTSD, hospice patients, cancer sufferers, children suffering from juvenile seizures, those suffering from Parkinsonism, and people with chronic pain would have a chance to change hearts and minds of counselors and commissioners over time with their personal stories. Okay, so the way you're getting, let's say, Malheur County to recognize the needs of the desperately sick and disabled residents is by making those people drive hours to get to a legal dispensary in the West, or forcing them to find black market weed dealers in the East? You're going to get them to understand the plight of the sick by allowing a city council or county commission to ban the medical marijuana dispensaries near these patients that already exist? I mean, how much of this overtime is this going to take, Senator? Eastern Oregon has heard these stories from patients since before medical marijuana's statewide passage in 1998. And thank God you weren't in office then to bitch and moan until you got West Idaho's right to treat them still all as criminals, because we didn't vote 55%. We voted 55% against medical marijuana. Yeah, those patients would still be criminals if you had your way until they managed to sway the hearts and minds of their wise and benevolent overlords on the city council. He continues, aiding them in this effort will be the experience of other jurisdictions which will suffer none of the predicted adverse effects of medical clinics and low-key recreational outlets. The result? Maybe not next week or next year, but sooner rather than later, the opt-out decisions will begin to be unwound. In this case, by a simple vote of the majority of councilors and commissioners, rather than an expensive, high-profile local referral election. Right. These Eastern Oregon counties will get to suck up Western Oregon marijuana tax money as they observe the marijuana commerce out west, and they'll all have a change of heart that they haven't had over the past 2 years of observing Western Oregon's functioning medical marijuana dispensaries that have all operated with none of the predicted adverse effects. Sooner rather than later. Where the 17 years of medical marijuana in Oregon serves as the upper bound for later. I'm sure a lot of those cancer patients, AIDS patients, MS patients have got 2, 10, 17 years to wait for Malheur County to figure out marijuana's medicine. He continues, I believe in the basic compassion of people. Counselors will respond to direct appeals from their constituents, and in a better way than if they are forced into a referral campaign. Right. Like they've responded to the direct appeals for the past 17 years? Look, if you believe in the basic compassion of people, what's your fear of having those people vote on whether marijuana should be legal in their neighborhoods or not? So you have a belief in the basic compassion of people, you just don't trust them to vote on things. You don't trust them in a democracy, but you believe in the basic compassion of people. And as for these counselors responding to their constituents, come on, let's get real here. What you're protecting is for these glorified homeowners associations to be able to ban all pot commerce, even the medical marijuana that you and I and every pollster who ever asks the question knows that a majority of even hyper-religious elderly conservative Republicans support. What you're doing, Senator Ferrioli, is protecting these city councilors and county commissioners from being in the uncomfortable position they'd be in if they had to campaign against sick and disabled people's access to medicine. He continues. Regarding the income from the sale of drugs, I agree that communities who opt out should have no income from sales. In a strange way, the offer of local tax revenue in exchange for acceptance of legal drug sales solidified support for a local opt-out provision. Drugs, right? Oh, drugs now. Okay, so how exactly is withholding a 3% local tax from West Idaho towns that don't have pot shops or dispensaries going to prevent these West Idaho towns from receiving a portion of the 17% state sales tax? Are you going to put through language that guarantees that the proceeds of Oregon's only sales tax are only dispersed to the counties that allow pot shops? Because that's what Measure 91 did. That's what 56% of the state's voters voted for. This is just insane, Senator Ferrioli. Nobody is buying this load of horse shit. We all recognize what you're doing here, and that is finding a way to ban medical marijuana in such a way that you're forcing the people and the patients to have to make legal what the people of the state have already made legal. You're talking about what a pain in the ass it's going to be to have 2 or 3 votes to undo something. You're forcing people to have 2 or 3 votes to do something. You're forcing us to have local elections to confirm a statewide election. This is a terrible precedent to be setting. You might as well split the state down the Cascade Mountains and make it West Idaho. At least that way, all the tax money we're paying here in New Oregon would stay in New Oregon. Holy shit. I got a little more to conclude on this. We'll cover that in the next segment. Plus, we got guests in the studio. Pork Chop is here. Bob from Delta 9 THC Holistic Health is here. And so am I. I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you